Shavua Tov. We're up to the Mishnah Daf Tzadi Amid Beis. And the Mishnah is discussing the question of which karbanos require nisachim. Kol karbanos atzibur v'ayachid tu'unim nisachim. The general rule is that every carbon should be accompanied by niskei yayin, unless we know otherwise. Chutz, and the only exceptions, min habekor v'maser v'pesach v'chatas v'yasham. So we'll see in the Gemara how do we derive the conclusion that these karbonos are excluded from nisachim, and the basic rule is that nisachim only apply to a carbon that could be brought b'nidava, but there's no such thing as an nidava, as a voluntary bechor or maser or pesach or chatos or osha. Now, there are two exceptions to the exceptions, meaning there are two cases of a chatos and an osham where you, in fact, do require nisachim. Elo shechatoso shel mitzora ve'ashomo te'unim nisachim. So when a mitzora completes the tahara, the process of purification, then he's got to bring a number of karbonos. Amongst them are the chatos and the osham, and these require nisachim. And we'll see how we derive this from the psukim. The Gemara says as follows: Tanu Rabbanan. We learnt in a brisa with regard to nisachim. Let's read the pasuk in Bamidbar Perek Tes Vav. Vasisem Isha Lashem Ola Ozevach Lefale Neder O Benidava O B'Moadechem Lasos Reach Nichoch Lashem Min HaBokar O Min HaTzon. So the brisa that we're about to embark upon will take apart this pasuk and derive conclusions first from Vasisem Isha Lashem, which seems to imply that any carbon that's brought on the Mizbeach requires nisachim. Yochel, I might think, kol ha'ola li'ishim yehei ton nisachim, that all carbonos that have haktar al gabi Mizbeach require nisachim, and afilu mincha, right? Because the komets of a mincha is burnt on the Mizbeach. So I might think that it also should be accompanied by niskei yayin, Talmud Lomar, Ola. So the pasuk of Ola is a mute to exclude a mincha, and therefore a mincha does not require niskei yayin. There are cases where you bring a mincha and it's accompanied by niskei yayin, but that's only if it comes together with a carbon. But if a mincha comes on its own, then it is not accompanied by niskei yayin. Shlomim minayin, the Torah says that an ola requires nisachim. What about shlomim? Talmud Lomer zevach. Now zevach means shchita of a carbon, and since we already know ola, then the word zevach is coming to include shlomim. So a carbon shlomim, which like an ola could either be a carbon chova or a carbon nidava, requires an accompaniment of nesach yayin. Todo minayin. How do we know that a carbon todo, which is a category unto itself, And let's keep in mind that the Korban Toda is accompanied by 40 lechamim, and now the Korban Toda has to be accompanied by nesachim. Talmud Lomar o zevach. The extra word o comes as a ribui to include Toda. Yochel shanimar ba'af bechor maser pesach v'chatos v'yashov. We need a pasuk to exclude those cases. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk continues and says, "Lefale neder o b'nedava." And therefore, we derive the conclusion that ba b'neder nedava to nesachim she'eno ba b'neder v'nedarva eno to nesachim. So none of these five categories of karbanos can be brought b'nedava. You can't take a nedava on any of those five. Mashma lahotzias elu, that since you have a requirement for nesachim of ba b'nedava, therefore we exclude these. Otzi es chovos habos machmas haregel beregel. By the same logic, applying that same rule, we should exclude all the karbanos that are brought on the holidays because they cannot be brought b'nedava. They are karbanos chova. So the pasuk of O zevach lefali neder nedava should now exclude all the moadim. Now, on the moadim, we have what's called an olas re'iyah. The Torah says that you have to go up to the Mikdash 3 times a year, and lo teiro panai rekom. You're not allowed to go into the Azor without a korban. And that's called an olas re'iyah. In addition to that, the Torah requires what's called shalmei chagiga. And there's a whole Masechta about chagiga. And every Jew who comes on Aliyah Regel would have to bring both a korban olas re'iyah plus a korban shalmei chagiga. And how do we know that even these korbanos require nesachim? After all, these are korbanos chova and not nedava. Talmud Lomer o b'moadechem. So not only the korbanos that are generated by the moed and have to be brought, let's say, for example, the musafim and so forth, but even the olas re'iyah and the shalmei chagiga require nesachim. Kol haba b'moadechem te'unin ta'un nesachim. Mashma lahavi es elu. Once you're already using the pasuk o as a ribui, avi, why can't I also be marbe se'ire chatos? Because on the regel we have to bring se'ire chatos as part of the musafim of every single moed. A goat is brought as a korban chatos, and since they are generated by the moed, they should also require nesachim. Talmud Loma, we need a miut v'chi ta'aseh ben bakar. And now we want to, the Bryce wants to know, why did the Torah have to add ben bakar? Ben bakar b'chlal haya. Right, ben bakar was included under every single korban, which is either brought from tzon or bakar. Lama yatza. So now we're going to apply the principle of a hekesh. Lahakish elov ma ben bakum yuchad ba beneder nedava af kol ba beneder umenedava. But in the case of a chatos, which cannot be brought beneder or benedava, we don't require nesachim, and that's derived from this miut, from the extra two words ben bakar. Now, getting back to the pasuk, at the end of the pasuk it says, "Lasos reach nichoach lashem Min habokar o min hatzon. Mata malomar. What is this pasuk teaching me? Lefi shenemar ola. Since earlier in the pasuk it mentions ola as machayev nisachim shomeani afilu olas ha'of b'mashma. Right? There's something called an olas ha'of, and would an olas ha'of, since it's an ola, require niske yayin tamalom min boko min atzon? And boker and tzon come to exclude oaf. Divrei Rav Yoshia. Rabbi Yonasan Omer, I don't need a pasuk to exclude nisachim in olas ha'of. Harehu Omer zeva. The Torah itself opens up this pasuk by saying that vasisem isheshem ola o zeva, and zevach means shchita, whereas an oaf instead of shchita there's malika, so that's certainly not included in the parasha of Nesachim, because oaf ain't o zevach. Nu and Cain. So now, according to the Shita of Yonasan, we got to go back to the drawing board and figure out, so why did the Torah have to say min habakar min hatzon, which Rav Yoshia said was coming to exclude oaf, olas ha'of. But now we don't need to exclude olas ha'of according to Rav Yonasan, because Rav Yonasan derives the exclusion of olas ha'of from the Sachim based on the pasuk zeva. Lefi shenemar Adam ki yakriv mikem korban Hashem min habehema. Right, we're going back to the beginning of Chumash Vayikra. Umin habaka umin hatzon. Yochol, I might think. Ha'omer harelai ola yavi mishnehem. Right, the Torah is talking about a person who took upon himself a neder to bring a korban ola, and the Torah says min habakar, and the Torah says min hatzon. So I might think that if he takes upon himself a pledge to bring a korban ola, he's got to bring it from both a bakar, let's say a par, for example, o minatzon, or for example a keves. And he's got to bring both of them. Talmud lomar, and therefore the Torah went out of its way to say min habakar o minatzon. And the word o is telling you that you need either or. You can take your choice. Either you bring your ola from tzon or from bakar. If he wants to bring two animals, one cattle and one sheep, that's fine. But he's not required to do so because the pasuk says, "Oh." Now this seems to contradict Rabbi Yonasan's position in all of Shas with regard to the following question. Whenever the Torah says this or that, or the Torah says this and that, does it mean one of the two, one or the other, or does it mean both? And Rabbi Yonasan holds that whenever the Torah says this and this, or if the Torah says this or this, it's one or the other, unless the Torah adds the word yachtav. Like, for example, in the pasuk of what does it say? The lo tachrosh v'shor v'seyachtav. That means yachtav means the two of them together. But for example, according to Rabbi Yonasan, when it says ish asher yikal es aviv es imo, he doesn't have to curse both his father and his mother, but rather he's chayav for cursing one of his two parents, either of the two, because it doesn't say yachtav. And here also, Rabbi Yonasan Lamali Kraha Omar Shifait L'cha Kosav Yachtov. And here in the case of Minat Bakr Minat Tzon, it doesn't say the word Yachtov. So there's got to be a special reason in this case why we would entertain the possibility that when he takes a pledge to bring a carbanola, he's got to bring it both from cattle, from Bakar, and from the flock, meaning tzon, from keves. Itzrich. Salke daitechamina. I would have thought that here it's different because of the vav.